Dr. Melody Hartwell had always suspected that galactic civilization was held together by paperwork, bureaucratic incompetence, and the stubborn refusal to admit that anyone might have been wrong about anything for the past 3,000 years. Her suspicions were confirmed the moment she stepped off the transport at the Galactic Military Academy, and was immediately handed 17 different forms to fill out. A manual titled Cultural Sensitivity for Primitive Species Integration, and a badge that read, Fragile, Handle with Care. Welcome to Nexus Prime, announced Commander Zexthul, a 7-foot-tall crystalline being whose idea of a warm greeting apparently involved scanning her with something that beeped disapprovingly. You must be our human exchange instructor. The way he said human suggested he was trying very hard not to say pet or possibly exotic specimen. Melody adjusted her entirely normal Earth clothes and tried to look professional despite the fact that every alien in the vicinity was staring at her like she might explode if someone spoke too loudly. Dr. Melody Hartwell, xenobiology specialist, she replied, extending her hand in what she knew was a futile gesture. Sure enough, Commander Zexthul recoiled as if she'd offered him a live grenade. Ah, yes, the physical contact rituals. We've read about those. He made a note on his datapad that probably said something like, subject displays aggressive territorial bonding behaviors. If you'll follow me, we'll get you settled in your accommodations. The accommodations turned out to be what appeared to be a padded cell with a window and a bed that looked designed for someone half her size. The walls were covered in warnings about emotional volatility monitoring and stress-induced behavioral modifications. Apparently, the Galactic Military Academy's idea of human psychology came from watching too many disaster films. Your teaching assignment, Commander Zexthul continued, handing her another datapad, is to provide cultural context for primitive survival behaviors to our elite cadet program. Nothing too stimulating. We understand humans can become unstable when challenged intellectually. Melody scrolled through her course outline, which was titled Basic Animal Responses in Pre-Technological Species, an Earth Case Study. It was possibly the most condescending curriculum she'd ever seen, and she'd once taught kindergarten. So, I'm here to talk about Earth animals to your military cadets? Exactly. Simple, non-threatening subject matter that won't overtax your cognitive capabilities. He paused, checking his notes. We've been told humans have emotional attachments to lesser life forms. This should be comfortable for you. The next morning, Melody found herself standing in front of a classroom full of the galaxy's most elite military cadets, all of whom looked like they could bench press a small moon. There were Krexthari with their multiple arms and predatory grins, Zulmari, whose scales practically screamed, I eat weaker species for breakfast, and what appeared to be a walking tank with eyes that the Academy had optimistically labeled as diplomatic core material. Right, she began, pulling up her first slide. Today we're talking about apex predators on Earth, and specifically, the relationship between hunting capability and parental behavior. The cadets exchanged glances that clearly said, the soft human is going to teach us about predators. One of the Krexthari, whose nameplate read Warrior Prime Kexval, actually snickered. Instructor Hartwell, he said with the tone of someone addressing a particularly slow child. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps you could focus on less challenging topics. Herbivore social structures, perhaps? Melody looked at him for a long moment. Warrior Prime Kexval, what do you know about Earth grizzly bears? I assume there's some form of decorative fauna? They're 800 pounds of muscle, claws, and bad attitude that can run 35 miles per hour and has a bite force that can crush a bowling ball. She clicked to the next slide, showing a massive brown bear. And when they have cubs, they become approximately 10 times more dangerous than their normal, already lethal baseline. The classroom went very quiet. You see, Melody continued, warming to her theme, Earth's apex predators share an interesting characteristic. The more deadly they are, the more devoted they tend to be as parents. Wolves, big cats, bears, they'll take on anything that threatens their young, regardless of size, numbers, or odds of survival. Warrior Prime Kexval's expression had shifted from condescension to what might charitably be called concern. You're saying that these predators become more dangerous when they reproduce? Exponentially more dangerous. A mother bear will charge a freight train if she thinks it's threatening her cubs. Protective instinct overrides everything else. Self-preservation, pack hierarchy, basic survival logic. They become perfectly willing to die fighting something they can't possibly beat. The Zulmari cadet in the back raised a clawed appendage. This is biologically impossible. Parental behavior should reduce combat effectiveness through resource diversion and emotional compromise. Tell that to a lioness with cubs, or a wolf pack protecting their den, or a human parent for that matter. Melody shrugged. We've got a saying on Earth. Hell hath no fury like a mother protecting her child. Turns out, it applies to most species. But this creates a paradox, insisted another cadet. This one apparently made of living metal. How can nurturing behavior coexist with apex predator instincts? The concepts are mutually exclusive. Are they? Melody asked. Or is that just what you've been taught? The silence that followed was the kind usually associated with the discovery of new laws, of physics, or the realization that someone had been doing math wrong for several centuries. Finally, Warrior Prime Kexval spoke up. Instructor Hartwell, are you suggesting that caring for offspring actually enhances combat capability? I'm not suggesting anything, Melody replied. I'm just telling you how it works on Earth. Take it or leave it. She was packing up her materials after class when a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she found herself face to face with the largest alien she'd seen since arriving at the academy. This one looked like someone had crossed a tiger with a small mountain and then given it advanced degrees in violence. Instructor Hartwell, the creature said in a voice like distant thunder. I am Sub-Commander Velthari of the Velthari Apex Corps. I would like to request a private consultation regarding your expertise in impossible behavioral paradoxes. Melody blinked. I'm sorry. My expertise in what now? Your knowledge of predator-parent behavioral integration. This topic is of significant strategic importance to my species. The sub-commander leaned closer, and Melody caught a whiff of something that smelled like ozone and barely controlled lethality. We have been monitoring your primitive theories with great interest. They're not theories. They're just observations about how animals actually behave. Yes, Sub-Commander Velthari said quietly. That is exactly what makes them so dangerous. The private consultation turned out to be less consultation and more emergency intervention in a species-wide existential crisis, which was exactly the kind of career advancement Melody had been hoping to avoid when she'd signed up for what she thought would be a boring teaching exchange. Sub-Commander Velthari had escorted her to a secure briefing room that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought intimidating and functional were the same word. The walls were covered with tactical displays, showing what appeared to be population decline graphs that would have made a statistician weep. The situation, Velthari began without preamble, is critical. Over the past 50 cycles, our apex breeding population has experienced a 93% decline in successful offspring survival rates. Melody looked at the charts. Okay, that's bad. What's causing it? Disease? Environmental factors? Predation pressure? The parents have stopped caring for their young. She blinked. I'm sorry. What? Our apex predators, the Velthari Prime caste, our species' warrior elite, have ceased all nurturing behaviors toward their offspring. Cubs are abandoned, ignored, left to die. Velthari's massive claws scraped against the table surface. We are facing extinction through parental apathy. That's... Melody paused, trying to process this information through the lens of basic evolutionary biology. That's literally impossible. Parental care is hardwired into survival instincts. You can't just turn it off. And yet, it has been turned off. Our military psychologists theorized that advanced training was successfully eliminating weakness factors from our warrior caste. Emotional attachment to offspring was classified as a combat liability. Oh. Melody felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. Oh, you idiots. I beg your pardon? You trained the parental instincts out of your apex predators? She stared at him in horror. On purpose? The Academy doctrine clearly states that emotional compromise reduces combat effectiveness by creating the exact opposite effect of what you just described, Melody interrupted, her voice climbing several octaves. You've got it completely backwards. Protective instinct doesn't make warriors weaker. It makes them exponentially more dangerous. Sub-Commander Velthari leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight. This aligns with your lecture on protective aggression. Our Strategic Analysis Division has classified your theories as potentially revolutionary psychological warfare doctrine. My what now? Melody looked at him blankly. I was talking about animal behavior. Basic mammalian psychology. This isn't warfare doctrine. It's just how brains work. Yes. Which is why your expertise is crucial to our survival. He pulled up another display, this one showing what appeared to be military transport schedules. We have arranged for you to consult on Velthar Prime. Our government has classified this as a priority alpha species preservation emergency. Wait, hold on. Melody held up her hands. I'm not qualified to solve an extinction crisis. I study animal behavior. I'm not a species-saving consultant or whatever you think I am. Dr. Hartwell, Velthari said quietly, you are the only being in known space who has successfully identified the causal relationship between apex predator status and enhanced parental protective responses. Your primitive Earth observations may be the key to reversing 50 cycles of catastrophic military psychological conditioning. But the transport leaves in 1 hour. 3 days later, Melody found herself standing on the surface of Velthar Prime, wondering how her life had gotten so thoroughly derailed. The planet looked like someone had decided that scenic was overrated and apocalyptically dramatic was much more aesthetically pleasing. Massive crystalline formations jutted from purple landscape under twin suns that cast everything in shades of impending doom. Welcome to the homeworld, announced High Strategist Rexval, who appeared to be Sub-Commander Velthari's supervisor and was approximately twice as intimidating. We have prepared comprehensive briefings on our species' reproductive methodologies, historical parental behavior patterns, and combat psychology integration protocols. Right, Melody said, adjusting her field pack and trying to look professional despite the fact that she was being treated like the galaxy's foremost expert on something she'd learned about in Zoology 101. Before we start with all the comprehensive briefings, could I maybe just observe some of your apex predators in their natural environment? The silence that followed was the kind usually associated with someone suggesting they paint racing stripes on a sacred monument. Observe them? High Strategist Rexval repeated slowly. In their natural environment? Yeah. See how they actually behave when they're not being studied or trained or psychologically conditioned. Just watch them be themselves for a while. This is... Rexval consulted his datapad frantically. This methodology is not in any of our research protocols. Direct observation of uncontrolled subjects in non-laboratory conditions represents significant data contamination risks. Or, Melody suggested, it might tell you what they actually do when you're not messing with their heads. The debate that followed involved approximately 17 different committees, 4 emergency consultations with off-world experts, and a formal review by something called the Scientific Methodology Approval Board. In the end, Melody's suggestion to just go look at them was classified as revolutionary observational methodology and approved with the kind of bureaucratic fanfare usually reserved for declaring war. Which was how she found herself hiking through a nature preserve toward what her guides kept referring to as the apex breeding territory, accompanied by a security detail that looked prepared to fight a small war and a scientific observation team that was taking notes on everything from her walking pace to her breathing patterns. The Velthari Prime caste maintains territorial ranges of approximately 50 square kilometers per breeding pair, explained Dr. Vexmary, the expedition's xenobiologist, who had been very carefully not calling Melody a primitive amateur for the past 2 days. Current behavioral models suggest complete territorial abandonment during reproductive cycles. Meaning? They have cubs and then just Leave. They crested a ridge overlooking a valley that looked like something from a nature documentary about beautiful but deadly places, and Melody spotted their first Velthari prime pair. They were roughly the size of Earth lions, if Earth lions had been designed by someone who thought regular lions needed more teeth, claws, and barely contained violence. "There," whispered Dr. Vexmari, pointing to where two massive predators were lying in the shade of crystalline formations. Male and female pair bond. They should have cubs approximately 1 to 2 cycles old, based on territorial marking patterns. Melody pulled out her binoculars and studied the pair. They looked healthy, well-fed, and completely relaxed. Where are the cubs? According to behavioral models, abandoned in the birth den approximately 12 kilometers north. And the parents just left them there. Correct. Standard post-conditioning response. Elimination of attachment behaviors results in... Melody lowered her binoculars and stared at Dr. Vexmari. "Those aren't cubs in that den." "I beg your pardon?" "Look at the parents. Really look at them." She handed him the binoculars. "Tell me what you see." Dr. Vexmari focused on the pair for a long moment. "I see. They appear to be resting in a defensive formation, which is unusual for post-abandonment behavior patterns. They're guarding something." Melody started down the slope toward the valley floor, ignoring the panicked whispers from her security detail. "They haven't abandoned their cubs. They've just moved them." "Dr. Hartwell, please maintain safe observation distance." "Those parents are exhibiting classic protective positioning," she called back over her shoulder. "The cubs are probably in that cave system behind them. They've just established a defensive perimeter." She was halfway across the valley floor when the male Velthari prime raised his massive head and looked directly at her. For a moment that stretched like elastic, they regarded each other. The human xenobiologist who was supposed to solve an extinction crisis, and the apex predator who was supposedly incapable of caring about his offspring. Then the female emerged from what Melody now realized was a carefully concealed den entrance, carrying something small and fuzzy in her mouth. "Oh," Melody breathed, as the male rose to his feet and began walking toward her with deliberate, measured steps. "Oh, you beautiful, brilliant parents." Behind her she could hear her security detail preparing weapons and her scientific observers frantically recording what they probably thought were her final moments. But the male Velthari prime wasn't approaching her with predatory intent. He was carrying 2 small, squirming cubs, and his mate was following with 2 more. And somehow, despite 50 cycles of military conditioning and psychological warfare training designed to eliminate every trace of parental instinct, these apex predators had looked at the strange, soft alien in their territory and decided she was exactly the kind of creature who should meet their babies. What happened next would later be classified by the Galactic Council as either unprecedented interspecies pack bonding or the moment a human accidentally became the galaxy's most dangerous weapon, depending on which committee was filing the report. Melody's response was entirely automatic and completely human. When presented with baby animals being carried toward her by their obviously proud parents, she did what any reasonable person would do. She held out her arms. "Oh, hello there," she cooed softly, as the male Velthari prime deposited 2 squirming cubs directly into her hands. "Aren't you just the most beautiful little predators I've ever seen?" Behind her she could hear Dr. Vexmari making strangled noises that might have been attempts at speech, while her security detail was apparently having some kind of collective nervous breakdown involving the rapid clicking of weapon safeties. The cubs, meanwhile, were doing what baby mammals do when presented with a warm, soft creature who was making appropriately nurturing sounds. They snuggled closer and made tiny chittering noises that were probably the Velthari equivalent of purring. "Dr. Hartwell," Dr. Vexmari finally managed to whisper, "you are currently holding the offspring of apex predators who should, by all behavioral models, be attempting to kill you for approaching their young." "Yeah, well," Melody said, gently stroking one cub's fuzzy head, while the parents watched with expressions she could only describe as parental pride. "Your behavioral models are apparently wrong." The female Velthari prime made a low, rumbling sound and nudged one of the cubs closer to Melody's face. It was such an obvious, "Look how cute my baby is" gesture that Melody couldn't help but smile. "They're gorgeous," she told the parents seriously. "You've done excellent work." What followed was approximately 15 minutes of the most inadvertent interspecies diplomacy in galactic history. The parent Velthari treated Melody like a visiting dignitary they were desperate to impress, bringing her their cubs for inspection, showing off their den, and generally behaving like any proud parents introducing their offspring to their favorite aunt. Melody, for her part, responded exactly the way she would have with any new parents. She admired the babies, complimented their development, and offered completely unsolicited advice. "You know," she said conversationally, while one cub tried to chew on her hair, "they look like they're at the age where they should be starting to play fight. On Earth, that's how young predators develop their hunting skills." The male Velthari Prime tilted his massive head in what was clearly a question. "Play," Melody explained. "You know, roughhousing, mock hunting, chase games. It teaches them coordination and instincts in a safe environment." She paused. Do you play with them?" The parents exchanged what could only be described as confused looks. The female made an uncertain churring sound. "Right," Melody said, understanding dawning. "Your military training probably classified play as frivolous behavior or something equally stupid." She set the cubs down carefully and picked up a small stick. "Watch this." She dragged the stick along the ground in front of the cubs, making it twitch and dart like prey. Immediately, their hunting instincts kicked in, and they pounced on it with adorable ferocity. The parents' reaction was extraordinary. Both adults went rigid with what appeared to be shocked recognition, watching their cubs' natural predatory responses with the intensity of beings witnessing a miracle. "See?" Melody said, letting the cubs kill the stick. "Play behavior. It's not frivolous. It's training. They're learning to hunt, to coordinate, to use their natural abilities." She looked up at the parents. "You should try it." What happened next would later be analyzed by xenopsychologists across 17 star systems and would fundamentally reshape military child-rearing doctrine throughout known space. The male Velthari Prime, this apex predator who had been conditioned to eliminate all emotional weaknesses, crouched down and began to play with his cubs. It started tentatively, a gentle paw batting at one cub, a mock stalking behavior directed at another. But as the cubs responded with delighted chittering and enthusiastic pouncing, the parents became more animated, more engaged, more happy, Dr. Vexamari breathed, his scientific instruments forgotten as he watched the family interact. They're experiencing parental satisfaction responses. The neural pathways weren't eliminated, they were just suppressed. "Of course they weren't eliminated," Melody said, scratching the female behind her ears while the male taught one cub how to properly ambush a piece of vegetation. "You can't train evolution out of a species in 50 years. The instincts are still there. They just needed permission to use them." The transformation was remarkable. Within an hour, the previously abandoned cubs were engaged in complex play behaviors with both parents, learning hunting techniques through games that looked suspiciously like the kind of roughhousing Melody had seen in Earth wolf packs. "Dr. Hartwell," Dr. Vexmari said quietly, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose entire academic career had just been revolutionized. "I believe you may have just solved our extinction crisis." "I suggested they play with their kids," Melody replied dryly. "It's not exactly rocket science." But word of the human apex predator whisperer spread through galactic communication networks with the speed typically reserved for declarations of war, or really good gossip. Within days, Melody found herself fielding consultation requests from species across known space. The Krexthari hegemony wanted her expertise with their malfunctioning warrior parent caste. The Zulmari collective requested immediate intervention in what they termed reproductive facility failures. The Crystalline Federation formally petitioned for her assistance with their emotional compromise epidemic. "Dr. Hartwell," announced High Strategist Rexaval during what had become a daily briefing on the expanding crisis, "we have received 47 separate requests for your primitive parenting methodologies." "They're not primitive," Melody protested, reviewing the list of species having identical problems. "They're basic mammalian psychology. Well, basic psychology for any species that exhibits parental care behaviors. Nevertheless, the Galactic Council has called an emergency session to address what they're terming the predator parenting phenomenon. You've been classified as a strategic resource. A what now? The galaxy's foremost expert on impossible predator psychology, Rexaval read from his official communication. Congratulations, Dr. Hartwell. You've accidentally revolutionized military child-rearing doctrine for approximately 200 species. Melody stared at him. I told some parents to play with their children. Yes. Which, according to 3,000 years of established military psychological theory, should have been impossible to achieve. The Emergency Galactic Council session convened via holographic conference, with representatives from dozens of species, all desperately seeking consultation on their mysteriously failing reproduction programs. Melody found herself sitting at the center of it all, trying to explain basic animal behavior to beings who had apparently forgotten that caring for offspring was a survival trait rather than a weakness. The pattern is consistent across multiple species, reported the Zulmari representative, her scales rippling with stress colors. Military conditioning has successfully eliminated emotional compromise factors from our warrior castes, but reproductive success has declined by 86%. Because you trained the parental instincts out of them, Melody said for approximately the 20th time that day. Caring for young isn't emotional compromise, it's evolutionary programming. You've been fighting your own biology. But surely, interjected the Crystalline Federation delegate, advanced military doctrine should supersede primitive biological responses? Advanced military doctrine, Melody replied with the patience of someone explaining basic math to particularly slow students, apparently doesn't understand that protective instinct makes warriors more dangerous, not less. The Krex Thari representative leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing on her intently. Dr. Hartwell, are you suggesting that our entire military psychological framework is fundamentally flawed? Melody looked around at the assembled representatives, all of them dealing with identical crises, all of them having made the same catastrophic error in assuming that caring made their warriors weak. I'm suggesting, she said slowly, that whoever designed your military psychological framework never met a human parent defending their child. The silence that followed was broken by the Velthari delegate's urgent communication request. Dr. Hartwell, Sub-Commander Velthari's voice carried a note of something that might have been panic. We have discovered something disturbing in our historical military records. What kind of disturbing? The parental instinct suppression protocols weren't developed independently by each species. They all originated from the same source, a unified military doctrine that was implemented across the galaxy approximately 50 cycles ago. Melody felt a chill that had nothing to do with the climate control systems. What source? The records are classified, but preliminary analysis suggests a coordinated effort to eliminate what the documentation refers to as primitive emotional vulnerabilities from all warrior castes across known space. Someone, Melody said slowly, deliberately sabotaged parental instincts in apex predators across the entire galaxy? It appears so. And Dr. Hartwell, according to these records, the psychological conditioning protocols were specifically designed to prevent the emergence of what they called human-style protective aggression in alien military forces. The investigation that followed made Melody realize that her simple teaching exchange had accidentally uncovered what was possibly the galaxy's most successful long-term psychological warfare campaign. The Unified Combat Psychology Protocol, announced High Admiral Kexthane during the Emergency Military Leadership Conference, was implemented across all allied species approximately 50 years ago. The stated goal was to eliminate emotional vulnerabilities from warrior castes. Melody looked around the conference room, which contained what appeared to be every military leader in known space, all of whom were trying very hard not to look at her directly. Let me get this straight, she said. Someone convinced every major military power in the galaxy to psychologically condition their warriors to suppress parental instincts, and nobody thought this was suspicious. The research was quite compelling, admitted Supreme Commander Velkari. The documentation clearly demonstrated that emotional attachment to offspring created combat hesitation and tactical decision-making impairment. "Show me the research," Melody said flatly. What they showed her was possibly the most elegant piece of academic fraud she'd ever encountered. Centuries' worth of carefully fabricated studies, all concluding that parental care made warriors less effective. "This is garbage," she announced. "Sophisticated garbage, but still garbage." "Dr. Hartwell," High Admiral Kexthane said carefully, "those studies represent the foundational research for modern military psychological conditioning across. They're wrong." Melody pulled up her datapad. "On Earth, our most effective human warriors throughout history have been parents defending their families. The protective instinct doesn't make you weak. It makes you absolutely terrifying." "Let me tell you about human parents," Melody interrupted Admiral Rexmali's protest. "A 100-pound human mother will attack a grizzly bear if it threatens her child. Not because she can win, because the alternative is unacceptable. That's not weakness. That's the kind of commitment that wins wars." "Your fake research assumed that caring makes you hesitant," she continued. "But when a parent's offspring is threatened, they don't become more careful. They become more dangerous. They stop calculating odds and start eliminating threats." High Admiral Kexthane studied her data with the expression of someone whose worldview was undergoing rapid revision. "You're suggesting that 50 years of military psychological development have been counterproductive?" "I'm suggesting that whoever designed your protocol knew exactly what they were doing, systematically weakening every major military force in the galaxy." Intelligence Director Zexaval reported his findings. "The protocol originated from the Intergalactic Institute for Advanced Combat Psychology, which never actually existed. Someone created an entire fictional research organization and convinced every major military power to voluntarily weaken their own warrior castes. And it worked perfectly," Admiral Rexmali admitted. "Our reproductive success rates have declined, warrior effectiveness has decreased, and military readiness is at historically low levels." What Melody proposed was revolutionary. Combat training should include parenting skills. "You're not suggesting that we integrate child-rearing instruction into warrior training protocols?" Supreme Commander Velkari said carefully. "I'm demonstrating it." The demonstration took place on a military training ground. High Admiral Kexthane had reluctantly agreed to participate. "Admiral, I want you to attack me with everything you've got." Full combat intensity. What followed was a carefully controlled combat demonstration. High Admiral Kexthane approached with professional competence, utilizing advanced tactical training and superior physical capabilities. Then Melody handed him a Velthari cub to hold. "Now, attack me while protecting that baby." The transformation was immediate. The Admiral's combat style shifted to absolute protective fury. Every movement became more decisive, more ruthless, more committed to eliminating any potential threat to the small creature in his arms. "You see? Caring doesn't make you hesitant. It makes you unstoppable." The restructuring of galactic military doctrine happened with bureaucratic panic speed. Within months, military academies were implementing paradoxical combat psychology, the concept that warriors fought better when they had something to protect. Melody found herself appointed as Chief Instructor of Paradoxical Combat Psychology, responsible for training the beings who had called her weak and emotionally unstable. "The irony is not lost on me," she mentioned to Subcommander Velthari during a consultation meeting. She was currently bottle-feeding a baby Krexthari, while its parent received instruction in enhanced parental combat integration. "Dr. Hartwell," Commander Zexthal announced, entering with formal deference, "the new cadets are ready for their first lecture." Through her office window, she could see the same training ground, where she'd been dismissed as too weak to handle intellectual challenges. Now it was full of elite alien warriors, learning that caring made them more effective fighters. "Tell them I'll be right there," she said, transferring the cub back to its grateful parent. As she headed toward the classroom, Melody reflected that she was now the galaxy's foremost authority on military psychology, despite being considered the physically weakest being in known space. Her students included the same instructors who had originally dismissed her primitive intellect. "Today," she announced to the assembled class, We're going to discuss why the most dangerous predator in any environment is the one with cubs to protect. In the back of the classroom, a Velthari parent sat with her cubs, watching intently as the small human explained to the galaxy's fiercest warriors that love was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Melody felt like she was finally teaching something that mattered.